Imagine pouring your heart, your creativity, your entire soul into your home, only to have it ripped away because someone's spoiled daughter thought it was cute. But instead of crying, this retired art teacher did something legendary. She turned her beloved dream home into a lifeless, soulless nightmare, and gave the new owners exactly what they deserved. If you've ever felt powerless in the face of greed, or wanted to take back control when life feels unfair, hit that like button, subscribe, and get ready for one of the most satisfying slow-burn revenge stories you'll hear today. There's a house in our neighborhood that everyone knew about. Not because it was flashy from the outside. In fact, it had this quaint, pre-built cottage-style front that looked like something out of a storybook. But inside, that's where the magic lived. Floor-to-ceiling murals painted by the tenant herself. Scenes from The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, classic fairy tales, and even lesser-known folklore. Every brushstroke whispered a story. Every wall told you that someone deeply creative, deeply passionate lived here. That someone was Rebecca. Rebecca wasn't just the lady down the street. She was a former art teacher who later ran one of those paint and sip businesses way before they became trendy. She taught thousands how to find beauty in mess, color in chaos. Eventually, she retired to doing custom commissions and decorating furniture. She was soft-spoken, kind, and had a warmth that made you feel like you'd known her for years. And even when I, back in my younger, dumber days, annoyed the hell out of her by revving loud trucks and speeding past her house, she never yelled, never lashed out, just asked me kindly to stop. We eventually made peace, became friends. She had an informal agreement with the old landlord, the guy who owned the house since the 80s, that the murals were fine as long as they stayed inside. She'd lived there for decades, with the understanding that one day, she'd be able to buy the house outright. But that day never came. The landlord passed away unexpectedly, and everything, including Rebecca's home, was passed down to his kids. Enter the new landlord, or rather his entitled son. Now this guy had barely stepped foot in the neighborhood before. But one weekend he showed up with his teenage daughter in tow to inspect the house Rebecca had called home for over 30 years. And that was it. His daughter took one look at the whimsical murals and the fairy-tale cottage facade and decided she wanted it. No regard for Rebecca. No respect for her decades of work. Mine. And since Rebecca never had a formal lease, just a handshake agreement with the original owner, she was vulnerable. They claimed the murals were damaging the resale value. They said she altered the property without permission. They used her own art as the weapon to kick her out. Imagine that. The very thing that made this house hers turned against her. Rebecca was devastated. She cried, not just because she was losing a roof over her head, but because she was losing the soul of her life. Every corner of that house held memories, colors, layers of herself. But Rebecca wasn't one to wallow. At the last minute, she managed to buy a new property out of state. One that, incredibly, had an art studio built right into the first floor. A blank canvas for a new beginning. Still, she wanted to leave the house respectfully. Just walk away. But that's when my friend stepped in. My friend, let's call him Marcus, is a professional painter. And when he heard what happened, he offered something wild. Let me repaint the house for you, for free. I'll erase the murals, bring it back to neutral for the next tenants. I could use the practice with my new sprayer. Rebecca hesitated, but eventually said yes. Maybe it was her way of saying goodbye. Marcus also called in a landscaper friend. They agreed. The facade, the cute cottage front, would be carefully removed and preserved. The bushes, given to the landscaper in exchange for his time. So the week after Rebecca moved out, all her furniture safely in storage, staying at Marcus' guest house. The transformation began. The first week was gut-wrenching. Sanding machines buzzed through the walls like chainsaws in a forest. Every mural, from the dreamy undersea kingdom in the hallway to the enchanted forest in the living room, was stripped away. What was left looked like the ghosts of memories, blotchy patches of color and pain. Then Marcus brought out his toy, a high-end paint sprayer that could coat an entire wall in 4 smooth passes. He masked off the floors, outlets, everything. And then, he began the death coat. Kills primer, white, cold, merciless. Once dried, he dipped into what we now jokingly call the Rebecca collection. But these weren't her colors. This was Rebecca condition, our nickname for those awful, bland flipper houses. You know the ones. White semi-gloss walls. Depressing gray cabinets. That soul-sucking ashtone laminate that tries to look like wood but just looks tired. Marcus went all in. Trim, gray. Outlet covers, gray. The beautiful wooden cabinets she'd painted by hand, gray. It was like watching someone take a Monet and dunk it in bleach. When I walked in afterward, the house felt dead. The last piece was the front of the house. The cute cottage facade. The charming bushes and flower beds. Ripped out. In their place, bare gravel. A single decorative boulder. Sand where there used to be color. It looked less like a cozy storybook home and more like a foreclosed flip that had been sitting on the market too long. A few days later, I was fixing a leak at another neighbor's house when I glanced over. The art house, still empty. Asked around, "Hey, didn't someone new move into Rebecca's old place?" One neighbor raised an eyebrow. They showed up earlier this week with some U-Hauls, but didn't unload anything. Haven't seen them since. Let me repeat that. The daughter, the one who fell in love with the house, walked into a hollow shell. All that character, all that whimsy and charm she was so desperate to steal, erased. She